Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm joined today by Joe Alder, Rocket's head of SEO. Joe, how are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you. Hey, James, good to be here.
What have you been up to today, Joe?
I have been catching up on work after spent a lot of time on doing the webinar this week.
We love that. It's good to hear. So we thought that today it's obviously a topic which is of massive interest and importance to Australian marketers, which is the rise of ChatGPT. And I think more specifically, how do you actually rank as prominently as possible in ChatGPT? How do you take advantage of what has become such an important channel in the marketplace? So Joe's role at Rocket is head of SEO, and since ChatGPT launched and popularized in November 2022, everything that Rocket has done around ChatGPT optimization, it has sat within Joe's team. So I thought he'd be the guy to bring on board and have the conversation with. And we've been doing a huge amount of research over the last 18 months into this space. So we've been running ChatGPT optimization campaigns for clients for a little over, I think, 16 months. We're kind of looking at our notes leading into the session today. We've been doing a lot of first-party research as well, where it is often in Australia so difficult to get accurate and up-to-date information into what's happening in the digital landscape. And Joe and his team he was crunching some numbers preparing for this, and they've been studying the top 1,000 Australian websites on a monthly basis for 18 months now. They've managed to analyze 68 million keyword queries, having a huge look into what impact AI, large language models, are having on the landscape out there. And we've tallied up the number of independent studies that we've kind of analyzed and fact-checked, I guess. And it's over 100 now. And there's just so much noise out there around how to optimize within ChatGPT. And a lot of it is actually not based on running campaigns. So I think that's the benefit, Joe, that you kind of bring to this discussion, is you're managing a team that is actually at the coalface, is testing what works. So Joe, I think where to start is, where are we at in the marketplace in terms of ChatGPT? What is usage looking like as we get just past the halfway mark of 2025?
Sure. So I guess the first stat was that I'm sure everyone knows, it was the fastest growing consumer app. So it hit 100 million users in 2 months. I think in second place was TikTok with, I think it was 7-8 months.
Yeah.
So huge growth, and it's only been growing from there. Now, as it currently stands, almost 1 billion weekly users. I think around 700 to 800 million users weekly are using ChatGPT, which is obviously a huge number. I think one of the more important stats is that almost 80% of people, workers, are using ChatGPT, and they're obviously a huge part of the consumer base, the people that have ongoing cash and want to spend money on services and products, and almost 80%. And then I think a lot of this discussion, we're obviously going to be talking around ChatGPT. And the reason for that is, from our research that we have done, ChatGPT currently holds an 85% market share in the LLM landscape. So if people are coming to your website from LLMs, 85% of the time it's going to be from ChatGPT versus Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, etc. So it's basically the Google equivalent in SEO. Google always had a massive market share over any others. And I think finally it's the third most searched site in Australia, behind YouTube and a site that can't be mentioned. So yeah, it's obviously being used by a lot of people within Australia at the moment.
We do allow for swearing on the Smarter Marketer podcast. It's very British of you to just so politely refuse to mention the large adult website that shan't be named. But yeah, 34% of adults are using it on a monthly basis, 78% of knowledge workers. It's quite interesting. In a B2B context, 48% of B2B buyers are now using AI tools to research software, 39% in the enterprise space, 30% of all consumers across the board. That was some research by HubSpot. And that research was done back end of last year, so the numbers have likely jumped up a little bit.
I think I was just going to say on that as well, I think that's a really important point, that a lot of people are using it in the research phase. So those 48%, most of them are only using it kind of in the research phase versus actually clicking through as they would on traditional search engines.
It's a good pickup, and part of the research that Joe's team has done, and I feel like I'm giving away all your information here, Joe, but there's a lot of information out there in the marketplace around traffic down, revenue up, and exactly as you just touched upon, which is a lot of the activity that used to be go to Google, run a search, go to a blog article, come back, do a slightly further down the funnel search, go to a blog article, come back, and a lot of that top of the funnel, middle of the funnel type activity by customers is now taking place within the apps and within ChatGPT rather. And as a result of that, when traffic does come out of ChatGPT, it's coming out with a much higher quality. And there was a big study done by SEMrush earlier on in the year, and they looked at huge data sets and found that traffic from ChatGPT was 4.4 times better than traffic coming from general sources. In your team, Joe, I think the number was like 5.1. So across all of Rocket's clients, the traffic that comes out of ChatGPT is 5.1 times more likely to convert. And that's a nature of people staying in ChatGPT to go back and forth. And then when they come out of it, they are further down the funnel and ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, and I think if everyone on the call, right, if they think about how they actually use ChatGPT, like in Google, you would have previously just typed in one keyword, buy computer mouse, right? Now it's more very informational and very specific. What is the best computer mouse? If you have wrist pain, you're doing all of that research within ChatGPT. You're comparing products, doing reviews. Even if you then go to Google to actually make the purchase, you are just so much more vetted in that initial stage because you've done all of the research phase. So there has been a small impact on especially blog traffic because of that, but a lot of that has more come from AI overviews. So they have been kind of, if websites are starting to see a drop in traffic from Google, I'd say we're less seeing a correlation from ChatGPT actually taking the traffic. Instead, it's more coming from zero-click searches. So they're still going to Google for those searches, but people aren't clicking through as much. And I really think that is there was some research actually published yesterday, unfortunately, just after we did the webinar, and it was showing the correlation of people using both search engines and ChatGPT. And most people are using them in line with each other. Like it's not so much a replacement.
And I think it'd be good at the back end of the conversation today to talk about measurement, because you kind of mentioned that a lot of the activity kind of happening within ChatGPT, it's kind of locked down. And I think it'd be good. I think listeners would enjoy for you to talk to the approach that we're taking at Rocket to try to give as much transparency as possible as to how we're reporting for our clients on what is happening in ChatGPT. But I think before we do, I think it would be good to talk around how to rank well in ChatGPT. And I think the starting point for that is just if you could just talk a little bit around how ChatGPT actually returns information. I don't want us to get into a technical deep dive here because listeners, the topic is around how to rank well. But I think in my experience in this space, in order to appear prominently within ChatGPT, you do need to have a foundational understanding of how it's working at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So I think to start off, there's basically two main modes in ChatGPT. So there's what we call database mode. So that is where ChatGPT pulls on its own training data. The challenge with this is it's quite outdated. So as of GPT-5, November 2024, so coming up to a year out of date. So that means we have less immediate control on that database storage. There's then web search, which is where it actually uses web search APIs. So it uses Bing primarily. Microsoft obviously had a huge investment in ChatGPT and OpenAI in general. So they're not using it as the same as you would see as a user, but they're using the API to pull the backend results. And we actually did some testing. And when Bing is not available, it is using Google as a backup. So yeah, that was some really interesting data there that we found. Once it does a web search, I think the best way of thinking about it is how you as a consumer would shop for an expensive purchase or product. So if you, James, were looking for a car, and you were kind of weighing up what you wanted, you'd be very specific on what you want.
What kind of car am I going to get, do you think?
I think you're going to get a medium SUV that can fit 3 children in the back and enough room for them not to disturb you while you're driving. So
I think we might be needing a large SUV if that's the case.
okay, a large SUV, and I guess
Black
you're
SUV.
yeah. Don't know what color would you go for? Black.
Black for sure, yeah.
Yeah, black. Cool. So you would be looking for a black large SUV that can fit 3 children. So for that, ChatGPT needs to understand, number one, what is an SUV? It probably already has that in the database mode, but what counts as a large SUV? So it's going to do something called a query fan out, which is where it breaks your initial prompt into multiple different queries. So the first might be, what is a large SUV? What is the best large SUV? When it then goes through that, it's going to look at websites that are very authoritative in the space. If it's under best, it might look at cars that have won awards. It might look at reviews. It's then going to weigh up all of these responses from this multiple query fan out and come up with the kind of ultimate response. It's then going to personalize it for you, so it knows you only care if it can fit 3 children in the back, right? So if it hasn't got a middle seat, it's not going to bring that back to you. So there is some personalization that happens on an individual user basis, and then it will return it with links.
Previous prompts the users put in based on where they're geographically located, based on all the memory that ChatGPT has on that user, for instance.
Yeah, and as well as like any specific training data, if you've instructed it to respond in a certain way. It actually also uses your IP, so you like to see your location. So for you specifically, it would only look at medium SUVs available in Australia. It also prioritizes fresh content, so it's not going to pull up articles of best media large SUVs of the past 5 years. It'll probably do the ones of the past year, or yeah.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of listeners, when you talk about the 2 modes, that's not, because when you go into ChatGPT now, you can kind of do deep research, you can do a normal query, etc. That's not that, right? That is just simply you put in a prompt and then ChatGPT immediately is making a decision. If it's a database, so if you punch in saying, what day of the week does the 5th of April fall on this year, it doesn't need to go off and use an API hook to find that information. It already has it in its database. Or if you go, what's the capital of Japan? It already knows that from its database. But if you're doing a query where it doesn't feel that all that knowledge that it has in its database is the right knowledge, it's then going out there and doing this kind of query fan out.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, because we actually did a lot of tests around this. So it's around 50-50 on the response where it does the search mode, and it automatically will select if it does this now. But when we tested for looking for products or services, ChatGPT almost always goes to the web search. So this is one we have the most control over, and it takes live information. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, cool. So I guess in terms of the actual guts of the conversation today, trying to give listeners a good understanding of how ChatGPT actually works, right? And how do you optimize for it? And we've broken the conversation into 4 parts in this area. So the first one is technical do's and don'ts, which is very much around essentially, can ChatGPT access your content? The second will be around copywriting, which is how to write for ChatGPT. And it is different. The way that ChatGPT likes content to be received is different to how we've traditionally configured and optimized content. Then Joe's going to walk through what he has found, him and his team, from the research we've done, from our experience on testing on client campaigns, the types of content that does perform well. And then we're going to jump into authority, which is a behemoth of a topic, but we'll try to give as many pointers as we possibly can. So Joe, I think if we could go from the technical do's and don'ts, and what are the things that listeners have to make sure their website is doing or not doing to actually be visible within ChatGPT?
Yeah, so I guess on the technical front, the most important part is that ChatGPT can actually find, index your content, and then pull it back as citations when users search. So the first thing you want to ensure is that it can actually read your content. So what I recommend doing here is selecting 4 of your key pages. So for Rocket, that might be our homepage, a blog page, a service page, and perhaps a product page, and giving ChatGPT a very specific prompt. Can you read our homepage and tell me what the last line of the content is? If ChatGPT cannot read it, it will usually state that it could not access this because either it was hidden behind a paywall, it uses JavaScript to render the content, or you are actively blocking AI tools. So that's a really simple test that businesses and marketers can do to make sure that they can actually be found in these tools. And then maybe just to break down some of the issues there. So obviously paywall content, that one's quite self-explanatory. On blocking AI tools, there's been a number of large websites as well as some hosting platforms that have recently come out and are automatically blocking AI tools from accessing sites. So Cloudflare, which is I think is one of the biggest hosting platforms, as of June or July this year, they automatically block AI tools. So if you're with Cloudflare, you definitely want to be aware of this. The last point is on JavaScript. So JavaScript is basically just code that renders content, and some websites rely on JavaScript to actually load the HTML, so the plain text. ChatGPT and other LLMs cannot read JavaScript to be able to then render that content, so it can't find anything behind that.
And so a good similar prompt to the one before, which is I think a great one. So it's the beauty of this space is we've actually got the tool that we're trying to optimize for to help tell us how to optimize for, which is awesome. So I think in the previous one, it's very much around pick the 4 pages. Can you pick out the last line with JavaScript? Similarly, again, right? You would say, is this page or is this site dependent on JavaScript, and can you roll it? And then ChatGPT will literally hit the page and say, yes, it is, no, it's not, or partially it is, and these are the things you need to do.
Yeah, exactly. Usually we'll actually say I couldn't render this page because it was done by JavaScript. I think the only thing to be careful of there, you're obviously only selecting 4 or so pages, which I think gives a good test space. But if you're a very large website, you probably want to do a more robust test because JavaScript can get pretty technical and pretty complicated.
Nice. We might link off to some Rocket collateral that we have that kind of gives examples of how to do these things. On the technical front, I think that could help listeners. And then I guess from a technical viewpoint, other things that listeners should be making sure they're doing or not doing to ensure that their site's being discoverable as possible in ChatGPT.
Yeah. So one, as I said before, and this comes back to all of the examples, ChatGPT is very much like a user. So if you as a user access a site and it takes 4 or 5 seconds to load, you're just going to bounce off, right? And that is very similar to ChatGPT. It has a low attention span like we do. So if your page loads very slow, from our tests, it's around 2.5 to 3 seconds. ChatGPT will then bounce off of the page. So again, if you use those 4 pages that we used in the example before, you put them into a tool like PageSpeed Insights, it will tell you under the section called Core Web Vitals, and there will be a point called LCP, which basically just means how long did it take for your entire page to load. If this is over 3 seconds, it's likely that ChatGPT will not load that page. So you will then want to optimize it. And it normally in PageSpeed Insights will tell you exactly how to do that. Google Search Console also does that at scale. Then moving on with Google Search Console. So I'd assume most people on the call would have Google Search Console already set up. So you want to make sure there's no key issues there as you would in a normal SEO campaign. But what's become more important is Bing Webmaster Tools, because I would say 95% of the time, ChatGPT is using Bing, not Google, to actually pull the results. So one, you want to make sure you're set up on Bing Webmaster Tools, and you also want to make sure there are no issues there. And as well, like something we've started to do is look more into performance in Bing, where obviously it was such a small percent before, but because there is a bit of a higher correlation between Bing and ChatGPT, we started looking at this. A few other things on the technical front. So structured data, that is something that I've seen is mentioned really important. And for ChatGPT currently, they don't actually read structured data, but there are some other LLMs that do, and it's also still very important for Google. So structured data is if you search for a product on Google, you'll sometimes see pricing or reviews that gets pulled out onto the search results page. That is done by schema or structured data. So having that, I think, is going to future-proof you, because ChatGPT is starting to look at enhancing their product functionality. And that is one of the key ways how you can identify the key markers of products. So whether it's in stock, out of stock, the price. On the product front, like as a small tip for people, if you just Google get my products discovered by ChatGPT, there's actually a form you can submit to get into testing with ChatGPT. Give them your URLs for your products, and yeah, hopefully it will mean you're one of the first ones that get listed when they actually bring out this functionality.
That's really good, Joe. that's a bit of a technical. Look, I know we're throwing a lot of kind of technical information at you for a podcast, but that stuff's really important. And as I said, we'll include a link to some slides around doing this stuff, because it is, if you're driving in the car or taking a walk. But it's kind of funny, like in some ways, because it's such new technology, there's all these complete do's or don'ts. And if you don't do one of them correctly, you're going to have absolutely zero visibility or absolutely massively impacted visibility. So I think a pretty easy litmus of just running through those checks and balances and making sure you're doing them well. I did want to talk to you around copywriting, and what have you found? Like, you've been working very closely with the Rocket copy team over the last year to try to change the way that we ourselves, and this isn't about using ChatGPT to write content for your marketing efforts, but it's about how do you structure your content to get indexed and turned out by ChatGPT when they are turning out responses. And so you've been doing a lot of work with Rocket clients with their copy teams, or with Rocket's copy team for our purposes. So maybe, Joe, if we could just talk around, how does ChatGPT like content?
Yeah, sure. So again, like using the user example, it's very much how ChatGPT behaves when it's looking for sources to cite. So the first thing, because it uses these search APIs, similar to is if you were doing a Google search, the first point of information it would get is the page title or the meta description. So that's what you see whenever you do a Google search, you'll get that information. So it will first read that to understand if it's what it's looking for. And usually it will look for something very specific. So in our car example before, if the article was best car, it might not click on it. But if it was best large SUV, it's much more likely to click on it. We actually also did some of our own research where we tested including the answer in the meta description, and this really increased the pickup. So in that example, best large SUV, and in the meta description we had, based on our test, the best large SUV was a Nissan XYZ, then you're more likely to get selected. So then once it selects a source based on that, again, it's not going to read the entire content. It's only going to go and find the snippet that's relevant. So it will look for, if it was the best cars, it will only go through until it finds what is the best large SUV. So that should be the H2 or the H1, if that's what you want ChatGPT to find. And then within that, it should be a very snippable paragraph, because again, it's not going to read the entire page. It's just going to read that relevant section. So we recommend around 65 to 120 words per paragraph, and it makes it very snippable and easy for ChatGPT to just extract that. You also, because sometimes your H1 will be that point that it wants to pull, you also want to include a kind of too long didn't read at the top. So just a short summary of what you found in the article, and to give a very quick use case. Markups, so like including tables and bullet points in your content, also really helps. Again, just like very much structuring it for users and ChatGPT. And I think with all of these recommendations, although they are what works best for ChatGPT, they also work well for users. Like if you as a user were looking for that, you don't really care about the entire article. You're only looking for the best large SUV. So you would only read that section. All of this advice is also going to correlate to good user experience, and then also good rankings in some of the traditional search engines as well.
And what's your, because obviously in your role at Rocket, SEO can mean a whole range of tasks to help a site appear as prominently as possible in Google Organic, right? And it's now also a whole range of tasks that are designed to have a client appear as prominently as possible in ChatGPT. And we'll talk a little bit later around some overlap there and where the overlap is and where it's not. But when it comes to content, how are you balancing the two? Like, how are you having our team or consulting with clients to try to have them presenting their content in a way that doesn't kind of run foul of Google, but also takes into account these particular needs of ChatGPT?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as I mentioned there, like none of this is going to negatively impact SEO. So we still want to make sure everything is very SEO optimized. And I would say a lot of these recommendations are kind of what we have been doing in our SEO strategies, apart from some of the more specific, like the snippable points. But like matching with what users are actually searching for. That is very much inherent to Google and keyword research and actually discovering it. I think the importance now is on trying to be a bit more match exactly what users would say, as that's going to increase the chances. So what we are doing at Rocket is we are still very much writing for SEO, but now we're starting to add in terms of structure, we're starting to add in more bullet points, more tables. We're trying to, especially in blog articles, we're trying to write in these snippable paragraphs. We're trying to include table summaries. We're including FAQs, which is something we've been doing for a while anyway. But we're really putting more prominence in certain areas that we might have been doing, but now it's like a clear focus that most of our content that goes out should follow these rules.
And I can hear marketers thinking, oh God, no, not another platform that we're having to kind of make our content less friendly to the user to make it more friendly to a platform. Like, are we still presenting content in a way that the end user, the human, is actually enjoying reading as well? Like, how are we balancing that?
Yeah, I think like all of that, like as I said, ChatGPT is very much like a user, and it performs as like if I was reading an article, I don't want to read the entire article. I only want to read what I went there for. So having very clear headings, having a table of summary, having a too long didn't read, like all of these are really strong signals, a strong user experience for users that are actually searching for this content.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something you mentioned in our staff meeting was, obviously, fresh content is liked by users, but even from an algorithm perspective, tests you're doing with making very minor updates to pages and then feeding it back as last updated, e.g. today, has a big impact on how it's then being returned in ChatGPT.
Yeah. So I think like ChatGPT's ultimate goal is to give you, the user, the best possible answer. So part of that is having the most up-to-date information. So if it's looking, again, using that car example, then it's not going to, if it was to pull back reviews of cars that were done 4 or 5 years ago, right, it's not going to be super relevant. So it's going to look for really fresh information. So if you are publishing new content, so if we were to publish what are the best cars of 2025, right, very specific, very local, that is going to get selected more obviously than 2024. And then second to that, because you also shouldn't just publish content just to add a date on the end, you can also republish content. So if you have like some research you've done, or like we have a few like kind of ultimate guides, right? Like this is something we republish once information changes throughout the year. And that again, just updating the date, making it clear, like structured data showing when it was last modified, that will show to ChatGPT that this content has been updated and it's still fresh. And again, this is another thing that's also going to help you really well on Google as well.
Yeah. And this is much easier said than done, but in the testing that we've done, ChatGPT absolutely loves original data, insights, unique content, and the very nature of large language models means that the barrier to get to average with content is gone, right? Anyone can create the 2025's digital marketing guide. And if you look at the websites that perform really, really well in ChatGPT are those that are consistently punching out their own first-party research. They're doing studies, they're doing reports, analysis of, and they have content that has a unique perspective. And that's a very easy thing to say and a very difficult thing to nail, but I think it is something that you should be keeping in your mind as to there's the technical setup of content that Joe's kind of has spoken to here. But where possible, if you can genuinely be putting together content that adds to the conversation in your industry, brings research, data, facts, figures, you will outperform your competitors that kind of are presenting far more flat content. I think fair to say, Joe?
Yeah, 100%.
With in terms of content that performs well, what about actual structure, like structures of content on page? I know you've spoken to some of those, but the actual types of content that ChatGPT seems to like?
So I think like as a writer, your goal is to make ChatGPT go to as few sources as possible. So there's a few things that you can do there. But one is like, if you do, so how people search as well, right? Like if you're using ChatGPT, it's going to be terms like what are the best or what product is good for me, like very much where it's, you almost want like a ranked response of best products, best services, how to do something. So because of that, like listicle type content, so I don't know, top 10 large SUVs. I think you're going to ban me from using SUV. If you were to do that, right? You've already ranked the SUVs. You've already said this is the best one. Here is second. So you're already helping it understand what you as a copywriter see as the best. Then also like pros and cons, product comparisons, anything where you're kind of weighing up and giving more information than just a single view, as well as like FAQ content, because again, like it's looking for specific answers to questions. So that in its name, frequently asked questions, right? So they're likely to be things that people are searching for. So FAQ type content by itself performs really well, as well as including FAQs at the bottom of the page. And then also location specific, also in our test performed really well. So just having Australia on the end or a specific city, suburb, that is going to perform better than some broader content.
Yeah, nice. Well, in the show notes, we'll also include these. I think we'll include all the slides because they're really good information that listeners can extract to kind of just go through and go, yeah, that is the type of content that I can easily build out on my site. Where I wanted to go next, Joe, was to talk around authority, which I think is something that has a big impact on the likelihood of a website to perform well. I think presuming your site is configured to actually allow ChatGPT to get in there, presuming that you're putting content together, that relates to your industry in a way that stands out. Can we talk about authority? And it is something that we're talking increasingly about with our team, with our clients, as it relates to optimizing within ChatGPT.
Yeah, sure. So I think like everyone's probably familiar in SEO, we have something called link building, right? And I guess authority is very similar, but interestingly, ChatGPT doesn't use links, at least not as Google does, but it does use brand mentions. So that means where your brand is actually mentioned is really important. And when when ChatGPT does the query fan out, it will actually check key sources on the web. So if you're searching for best running shoes, then it will look at the top ranked websites that are listing that, and it will actually go to them and see. And if you're on GPT-5 thinking mode, if you click on how it actually got there, there's a button where you can click thinking. It will actually show you those websites that it went to. A lot of times at the moment, and I think they might change this, but it's coming a lot from kind of like paid affiliate sites. So like for agencies, there's sites where you can kind of publish your agency and pay to be at the top. Because of that, sometimes ChatGPT is selecting those sources. So kind of like affiliate or directory type content is also performs really well, because it performs well when people perform those type of searches. Also just being referenced in very relevant publications. So if you work in real estate, if you're referenced in real estate articles, real estate blogs, especially in specific locations, suburbs, you have articles around that, that's really going to help you. The other thing on authority that's really big is reviews. So again, like ChatGPT is like a user. It wants to know that the product it's recommending or the service it's recommending has reviews backing it. So that would be Google reviews, Trustpilot, and product reviews.
And I think similar to the comment before around the beauty of this tool is that we can actually just ask it how it's doing these things. You've got a really good way that you've started to distill through our teams at Rocket, which is essentially when you're trying to look at authority, you put in a prompt kind of around the idea of, can you please break down your internal method for how you gathered this information? What sources did you use? What did you search? How did you decide on which brand, or how did you decide that was me? And then it gives you basically a blow-by-blow description of where ChatGPT is sourcing its information about you. And I think the most interesting thing about that is then doing it for your competitors, right? Where we can then start running those prompts about our clients' competitors, and then you start to see where there's a gap, right? Where can we get a brand mention? Where can we build out our own authority in the places that ChatGPT is actually going?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it will literally give you the exact sources it use, the type of search terms that it use. Sometimes it will try and push back a bit, like because it doesn't want to give away training data, but it gives you a very good blueprint of what to do. Yeah, again, this isn't helping my whole job being taken by AI, but it's a super practical tip for anyone in the call.
If your job's taken by AI, and so is mine then, Joe. possible that we are just two AI bots, right? That have
Yeah.
been trained on our own.
It's going to be in a few years that might be the case.
And I think the other thing about authority is it's OpenAI, ChatGPT. It does leverage some slightly different sites to the types of sites you're building up in Google, and like Wikipedia, Reddit, are really important places to play. And the studies we've done just showed, I think it's like 8.8% of returns are pulling in information from Wikipedia. Obviously, not all listeners are going to be able to have a Wikipedia page for their company, but some can. So actually, if you do the query fan out, if you actually look at where the information is being pulled about your business, you do have that chance to kind of tidy things up. Awards are absolutely ginormous, but it's easy to kind of say, go and get more awards. But particularly in our industry, if you look at how ChatGPT is reporting on which agencies to recommend to users, the fan out is really going hard into industry awards, which is a hard thing to win, but it's a pretty clever place for the large language model to be digging into, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but just in terms of like, what are your observations? Because I think the difficult thing for marketers is there's this new channel, it's exploding, it's becoming really, really popular. They're getting tapped on the shoulder. What are we doing here? Is this the same thing as SEO? Is it different? How do you speak to that kind of, that almost Venn diagram overlap between doing things in the best interests of Google Organic versus doing things in the best interests of ChatGPT?
Yeah, sure. So, like, first off, there is an overlap between websites that appear in ChatGPT and websites that appear in Google. So, studies are sometimes up to 60%. So, there is a correlation because it's using the API. However, that being said, when search terms get very much more specific, like they do in ChatGPT, that is where it can change. And that is a key area of ChatGPT, is making sure you have covered all possible responses, both in your content, but also having content pillars and content hubs. So you might have a main page, but then having sub pages that are deep dive into the content. And you mentioned Wikipedia is referenced a lot. I think one of the reasons for that is it's very comprehensive. It has citations of where it got the information, and it also dives into subtopics. And I think that is one of the most important parts. And as well, like in Google Organic, like we would do link building and trying to get authoritative links. That is still the case in ChatGPT, but we need to be much more specific on where we want to get them from. Like we want to find out exactly what sources ChatGPT are mostly using for those, and we want to go after them and be super targeted.
And we mentioned earlier that question that we get a lot from clients and prospective clients in this space is the measurement piece. It's a different space. We're so accustomed, I think, to having such integrated information coming out of Meta, in our Facebook ad platform, coming out of Google Ads, coming out of Google Analytics, what's happening, Google Search Console. Can you speak to, I guess, the challenges that clients have when it comes to tracking, and then what our kind of solution piece is to that?
Sure. So yeah, I think as you mentioned, like tracking in LLMs is really difficult, especially to get accurate information. So if you're all, like anyone listening to this, I'm sure they're using ChatGPT daily, how often you actually click the links are very, very small, because again, people are mostly using it in that discovery phase, and then they're using traditional search models or going direct to actually finish on. So from our research, the click-through rate was 1%, and sometimes like even less. So that means out of 100 queries in ChatGPT, only one time people are actually clicking through onto the link. So that in itself makes it very, very challenging. You can set up a Google Analytics filter to see that traffic that's coming through. So we have done that for all of Rocket's clients. We also have built dashboards so you can see exactly what AI sources they're coming from. But again, because of that low click-through rate, that traffic is really small. There is then some actual tracking tools that exist for AI tools, but none of them are perfect, because number one is no one knows what people are actually searching for. Because there is no Google Search Console equivalent, we don't know what term someone searched to actually land on your brand. So it's kind of like using research and hoping you capture those queries to actually track. But because people search very differently, much more personalized, like I think the average prompt length is 21 words, like it would be impossible to track those type of queries. So really the best we can get is kind of a broad overview of how you rank, and there is enough correlation to be able to determine that. So we've tried a lot of tools and I've not been impressed with any of them. So we've actually started building our own tool. We're testing that now and hope to roll it out so clients can actually see. And what we hope to do with this tool is track very specific queries, especially in the key areas, and also track it across the other LLMs, track it across Google, and start to correlate some of these questions that we are asking. And so clients can see the work we are doing is actually increasing that area. But again, it is an area of real challenge, at least to get accurate data. I think one like very old method that we've been doing is actually asking customers when they have found Rocket, how they found us. And sometimes they're saying they found us through AI tools, even if it doesn't show up in Google Analytics. But as it stands, they are the best option. So number one, set up a GA filter in your Google Analytics. Number two, invest in AI tracking software. And I would say track the top 20 products and track terms such as best, recommend me a product in X space, like something very specific that users are going to be searching for, and not so much as you would in Google, like single keywords, because it operates obviously very different to that. Yeah, I know I maybe didn't answer it as best as people were hoping, but does that help, James?
That's fantastic, because it is it's a different paradigm, and I think that's the difficult bit, and it's something that I see marketers struggling with, because if you look at the impact within Google of AI overviews, right, which is a similar theme to this, and the activity is still happening, but it's all happening in the Google ecosystem as opposed to bringing traffic, the old kind of search query, top of the funnel search query, click to a blog, come back, do another click, come back, is kind of not really happening as much, right? It's kind of do a search query, get the answer in AI overviews, ask the question again, and then you start to kind of do that more traditional. And as a result, you are having on top of the funnel queries, depending, like less traffic coming through on those types of terms. So I think it is important for marketers to have practical ways to see visibility, right? And I think the metrics that we are working with our clients on are the right ones until if we get a kind of search console equivalent coming out of OpenAI. So it's a fascinating topic. And Joe, thanks a lot for the conversation today. And anything else you want to add to the session before we wrap it up?
My final point is you will see a lot on LinkedIn and these other areas to create an LLM.txt, which is just like a directive to ChatGPT and other search engines. As it currently stands, none of the LLMs are using this, so it really is not necessary. So that's why I didn't mention it before. But yeah, otherwise, no, all good from me.
Joe, thanks a lot for coming back onto the podcast.
Thank you.